One phone call. That's all it took. Not a bomb threat, not a cyber attack, but a single quiet phone call from a woman who had just been publicly shamed for the color of her skin. She wasn't a politician or a celebrity. She was a doctor, a scientist, a woman who simply wanted to take the first-class seat she had paid for. But when the airline employee smirked and told her she wouldn't be comfortable up there, she didn't argue. She didn't yell. She stepped aside, pulled out her phone, and with a few calm words, unleashed a corporate tsunami that would ground 152 aircraft, freeze an entire airline in its tracks, and vaporize $2.1 billion in market value before the close of business. This is the story of how a moment of quiet bigotry ignited a firestorm of financial justice. The air in John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4 hummed with a familiar organized chaos. It was a symphony of rolling luggage, clipped announcements, and the low murmur of 1,000 intersecting journeys. Dr. Anya Sharma felt a sense of calm in the midst of it. For her airports were gateways not to vacations, but to progress. A renowned biochemist, her life was a series of flights connecting conferences, laboratories, and philanthropic missions. Today, it was Global Wings Airlines Flight 815 to London, where she was scheduled to deliver a keynote address on her team's breakthrough in protein folding research work that promised to revolutionize treatments for degenerative diseases. She was dressed for the grueling 9-hour flight. Soft-tailored black travel pants, a comfortable cashmere sweater, and practical but elegant flats. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her face was free of makeup. In her hand, she held a worn leather satchel containing her laptop and research papers. In her pocket was a first-class ticket, a necessary luxury that allowed her to work and then sleep, ensuring she arrived in London sharp and ready. Approaching the priority boarding lane for gate B24, she felt a familiar, subtle shift in the atmosphere. It was a look, a slight stiffening of a posture, a glance that lingered a second too long. She'd felt it her whole life, the silent questioning of her presence in spaces of privilege. She'd learned long ago to ignore it, to meet it with a quiet confidence that broadcasted, "I belong here." Today, however, that silent prejudice found a voice. The gate agent, a woman in her late 40s with a severe blonde bob and a name tag that read Brenda, gave Anya's ticket a cursory glance before her eyes swept over Anya herself, from her simple attire to her brown skin. A small, smug curl formed at the corner of her lip. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Brenda said, her voice dripping with insincere politeness. "There seems to be a problem with your ticket." Anya maintained her composure. "Oh, I confirmed the seat this morning. 2A. Is there an equipment change?" Brenda tapped her keyboard with exaggerated importance. "The system is showing this seat as unavailable. We've had a few last-minute changes." She avoided eye contact, focusing instead on her monitor. It happens. Anya knew a lie when she heard one. She could see the boarding pass of the man in front of her, also for first class, being processed without a hitch, unavailable or overbooked. Because if the flight is overbooked, I'm aware of the compensation protocols. I was the first to check in for this flight 3 days ago. Brenda's smile tightened. She leaned forward, lowering her voice into a conspiratorial, condescending whisper. "Look, we can put you in a premium economy seat. You'll be much more comfortable back there. We'll even give you a $200 voucher for your trouble." The implication was as clear as it was grotesque. You don't belong up front with the real first-class passengers. The insult was designed to be deniable, cloaked in the sterile language of customer service. But Anya felt it like a slap. Years of earning her place of shattering glass ceilings in academia and science, all reduced to a sneering assumption at an airport gate. "I'm not interested in a voucher or a different seat," Anya said, her voice dropping to a low, firm register. "I am interested in seat 2A, the one I paid for. Could you please process my boarding pass?" A small line was forming behind her. People were beginning to stare. A man in a crisp suit sighed impatiently. The public nature of the confrontation was part of the humiliation. Brenda straightened up, her face hardening. "Ma'am, as I've already explained, the seat is not available. You can either take the premium economy seat, or we can book you on a later flight." She was enjoying this, Anya realized. She was enjoying the power. "I'd like to speak to your manager, Anya," said her voice, devoid of emotion. It was a cold, calculated request. Brenda let out a short, huffing laugh. "Fine." She spoke into her radio. "Mark, I need you at gate B24. A passenger is refusing to cooperate." Mark, the station manager, arrived a few minutes later. He was a man swimming in a suit a size too large with a harried expression that suggested he lived in a constant state of putting out fires. He listened to Brenda's one-sided whispered account, nodding along. He then turned to Anya with a tired, placating smile. "Ma'am, I'm Mark Peterson, the station manager. Brenda informs me there's an issue with your seat. These things are unfortunate, but system errors do occur. We've got a great seat for you in row 15, and the $200 voucher is good for a year on any Global Wings flight." He wasn't listening. He was managing, de-escalating, trying to make the problem her go away. Miss Peterson, Anya began her patience now, a thin, brittle sheet of ice. "This isn't a system error. Your agent has made a judgment about me based on my appearance, and has decided I am not suited for the ticket I purchased. I'm asking you one last time, are you going to honor my ticket? Or is it the official policy of Global Wings Airlines to refuse service based on a passenger's ethnicity?" She used the word. Ethnicity. The air grew thick with tension. Mark's face went pale. Brenda, however, doubled down. "That's an outrageous accusation," she snapped. "I was trying to be helpful." Mark held up a hand to silence her. "Now let's not make this something it isn't." "No one is saying that. We are simply dealing with a logistical issue." He glanced at the line, then back at Anya. His decision was made. He was backing his employee. "The offer stands. Premium economy or a later flight. That's the best we can do." Anya looked from Mark's weak, evasive eyes to Brenda's triumphant smirk. She saw the entire system in that moment, the casual bigotry of the agent and the cowardly bureaucracy of the manager who enabled it. They had made their choice. Now she would make hers. She gave a single, slow nod. "I see." Without another word, she stepped out of the line. The passenger behind her, the man in the suit, pushed forward, eager to get on. Anya walked a few feet away to the relative quiet of the terminal window overlooking the tarmac. The massive Global Wings jet, its tail emblazoned with a golden eagle, sat gleaming under the morning sun. She pulled her phone from her satchel. It was a simple, standard-issue smartphone, but its contact list was anything but. She scrolled to a single entry, a name she rarely called a name that represented a force of nature in the world of global finance and logistics. She pressed the call button. It rang twice. A deep, calm voice answered. "Anya." "Alistair," she said, her own voice steady as a rock. "I have a problem." Alistair Blackwood was not a man given to idle conversation. As the founder and chairman of Blackwood Capital, a private equity and logistics behemoth with a portfolio so vast its tentacles reached into nearly every sector of the global economy. His time was measured in billions of dollars per minute. He sat in his office on the 90th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper, a space of minimalist steel and glass that offered a godlike view of the city below. He was reviewing a hostile takeover bid for a German robotics firm when his private line, the one reserved for a handful of people in the world, chimed. He saw his daughter's name and answered instantly. "Anya, is everything all right?" His voice was a low baritone, a voice accustomed to moving markets and ending careers with a single quiet command. "I'm fine," Father Anya's voice came through, clear and controlled, but with an undercurrent of cold fury he knew all too well. It was the same tone she used when a promising research trial failed, or when a board of older men tried to patronize her. It was the tone that preceded decisive world-altering action. "I'm at JFK. I was scheduled to be on Global Wings Flight 815 to London." "Was." Alistair repeated, his focus shifting entirely. He swiveled his chair away from the panoramic window and tapped a key on his silent keyboard, bringing up a blank intelligence dossier. "I was denied boarding for my first-class seat. The gate agent and station manager have decided based on their own criteria that I am not a suitable passenger for that cabin. They offered me a downgrade and a voucher." Alistair Blackwood's face remained a stony mask, but a dangerous stillness settled over him. Discrimination to him was not just a moral failing. It was an inefficiency. It was a sign of a poorly run, undisciplined organization. And this particular organization had made a fatal error. They had made it his business. Which airline, he asked, though he already knew. "Global Wings," Anya confirmed. Alistair's fingers danced across the keyboard. Global Wings Airlines, GWA. A publicly traded company they had significant dealings with. Not a majority shareholder, but something far more critical. "I see," he said. The dossier on his screen was already populating with data pulled by his firm's proprietary AI. Financial statements, debt structures, key contracts, executive profiles. It painted a picture of a company leveraged to the hilt, arrogant in its market position, but deeply vulnerable in its operational infrastructure. The manager's name is Mark Peterson. The agent is Brenda, Anya added. Gate B24. "Their names are irrelevant," Alistair replied, his tone dismissive. He wasn't interested in the foot soldiers. He was interested in the systemic failure they represented. "Are you safe? I'm standing by the window. They've just closed the gate." Anya's voice was steady. She wasn't asking him to get her on the plane. They both knew this was far beyond that now. This was about the principle. Alistair's eyes scanned a critical file, Project Nightingale. It was a multi-billion-dollar financing and logistics deal Blackwood Capital had structured for Global Wings. It included the leasing agreements for 60% of their new long-haul fleet, 152 Airbus A350s, to be precise. It also included the licensing for Blackwood's proprietary aviation logistics software, Odyssey, which managed everything from crew scheduling and fuel load balancing to payload optimization and maintenance cycles. The contract for Project Nightingale was a masterpiece of corporate law filled with clauses and covenants. One in particular stood out, Section 11C, the Material Adverse Change Clause. It could be triggered by any event that brought the airline into significant public disrepute or demonstrated a catastrophic failure of corporate governance. Denying service to the daughter of the man who owned their planes and the software that ran them certainly qualified. Alistair, handle it, Anya said. It wasn't a plea. It was a statement of trust. It was the same phrase he used with his own executive team. It meant employ the full resources of our enterprise to resolve this situation definitively. It's handled, he replied. I'll have a car for you at the arrivals curb in 15 minutes. It will take you to Teterboro. The jet will have you in London ahead of your original schedule. Go to the American Express Centurion Lounge. Someone will meet you there. Thank you. I'm proud of you, Anya. He ended the call and stared at the GWA logo on his screen for a long moment. It was a golden eagle, a predator. He permitted himself a grim, thin smile. Predators, he knew, had to be careful about which prey they chose. He pressed the intercom. Catherine, get me Marcus Thorne on a secure line and assemble the legal team for Project Nightingale. All of them. Now. Marcus Thorne was Alistair's chief counsel, a shark in a Savile Row suit. The legal team was a pack of them. Within 60 seconds, Marcus was on the line. Alistair. Marcus, Global Wings Airlines. We are invoking Section 11C of the Nightingale Agreement. Execute a full drawdown on the credit facility and issue an immediate notice of default. Concurrently, have the tech division suspend their Odyssey software license for breach of contract, effective immediately. There was a half-second of stunned silence on the other end of the line. Marcus, who had presided over the financial dismemberment of entire nations, was momentarily speechless. The scale of the command was breathtaking. This wasn't just a shot across the bow. It was a full-scale barrage aimed at sinking the entire ship. All of it, Marcus asked, his voice recovering its professional edge. Every plane we lease to them is to be grounded upon landing. No exceptions. Their software access is to be terminated in, let's say, 30 minutes. I want their entire operational grid to go dark and have our trading desk begin shorting their stock. Heavily. Understood, Alistair. May I ask the nature of the breach? Alistair looked out the window at the city below. They have demonstrated a profound and irrecoverable failure in their customer service protocols. He disconnected the call. The machine was now in motion. A series of encrypted emails and secure calls shot out from the 90th floor, triggering alarms in legal departments, financial hubs, and IT nerve centers across the world. Anya Sharma, meanwhile, sat in the hushed elegance of the Centurion Lounge, sipping a cup of tea. She felt a strange sense of detachment, as if she were watching a play unfold. She hadn't wanted this. She just wanted to go to her conference. But she had been pushed, and her father had taught her that when you are pushed, you do not just push back. You reshape the landscape so they can never push you again. Outside Flight 815, pushed back from the gate, its engines whining to life. Brenda and Mark were likely congratulating themselves on handling a difficult passenger. They had no idea that their little act of prejudice had just lit the fuse on a $2 billion bomb. In the Global Wings Airlines Integrated Operations Center, IOC, in Dallas, Texas, a sprawling, windowless room larger than a football field chaos arrived not with a bang, but with a flicker. It started on the main screen, a vast wall of monitors displaying a real-time map of the world, dotted with the 500-odd Golden Eagle icons representing their active flights. At 9:47 a.m. Eastern Time, an icon over the Atlantic, a flight from Paris to Chicago, blinked from green to red. Then another over the Pacific. Then a dozen more all at once. "What the hell is that?" muttered Dave Chenault, the lead operations coordinator, a man powered by coffee and 20 years of airline experience. Odyssey must be glitching. He radioed the flight crew of the Paris flight. "Global 88, this is IOC. We're showing a maintenance flag on your number 2 engine. Can you confirm status?" The pilot's voice came back, laced with confusion. "IOC, all our systems are green here. We're running smooth. Your end must be buggy." Before Dave could respond, a new wave of alarms erupted. This time it wasn't on the map. It was from the crew scheduling terminals. Dozens of flight crews scheduled for duty in the next 3 hours were suddenly flagged as unassigned and uncertified. "My whole crew roster for the evening bank just got wiped," a scheduler yelled from across the room. "It's saying their certifications are invalid." Then the third wave hit the one that turned confusion into panic. The logistics software, the Odyssey system that was the digital brain of the entire airline, simply shut down. The world map went blank. Fueling requests for departing aircraft were denied. Weight and balance calculations essential for takeoff couldn't be processed. Gates couldn't be assigned for arriving planes. The entire digital infrastructure of Global Wings Airlines had been bricked. "Get it on the line. Get Blackwood's tech support on the line." Dave bellowed into his headset, his heart pounding. This is a full system failure, a cyber attack. But it wasn't an attack. It was a contractual execution. In a data center in Austin, Texas, a single command from Blackwood Capital had revoked GWA's access license. The digital gates were closed. At airports across the country, the physical manifestation of this digital collapse began. Planes that had just landed couldn't get onto a gate as the system that assigned them was offline. They sat on taxiways, their passengers fuming. Planes ready for departure couldn't get clearance because the system couldn't transmit their final load data to the FA. The well-oiled machine of air travel ground to a screeching halt. Flight 815. Anya's flight was one of the last to get out. It was now over the Atlantic, a lonely green icon in a sea of red on Blackwood's internal monitoring system. But for the rest of the fleet, the damage was done. At JFK, at O'Hare, at LAX, at Heathrow. Global Wings ground staff stared at blank screens, unable to check in passengers' print bag tags or rebook cancelled flights. The polite apologies quickly turned to panicked shouts as thousands of stranded passengers overwhelmed the terminals. Richard Sterling, the CEO of Global Wings, was in a board meeting discussing quarterly profit margins when his assistant burst in, phone in hand, her face ashen. "Mr. Sterling, you need to see this." He waved her off irritably. "I'm in a meeting, Diane." "Sir, it's the entire network." "We're grounded." Richard snatched the phone. It was the head of the IOC. His voice was frantic. "Richard, we're blind. Odyssey is down. Completely. Their support line is routing to a lawyer. We can't move a single plane. We have 152 grounded aircraft that we can't even run diagnostics on. They're locked out. It's Blackwood. They're saying we're in breach of contract." Richard Sterling felt the blood drain from his face. Blackwood Capital, Alistair Blackwood. The man was a legend, a ghost who moved markets from the shadows. Their Nightingale deal was the backbone of his company's modernization strategy. A breach impossible. "What breach? What are they talking about?" he demanded. "They won't say Richard, they just referred us to a legal notice that was just filed, and the banks, our credit lines with them have been frozen. They just called in the initial loan for the A350s, all $900 million of it, due immediately." The room fell silent. The board members stared at him, their faces a mixture of disbelief and horror. The stock ticker on the wall behind him, which they had been watching with satisfaction moments before, suddenly seemed like a harbinger of doom. GWA was in free fall. It was down 10%, 15%, 20%. Each percentage point represented tens of millions of dollars in shareholder value evaporating into thin air. The numbers were staggering. 152 grounded aircraft, over 500 cancelled flights by noon, an estimated 80,000 stranded passengers. The direct cost of the cancellations vouchers and hotel fees would be in the tens of millions. The stock plunge was already costing over $1 billion. The loan call was a potential death blow, a move so aggressive it was designed to trigger bankruptcy. The final bill, when all was said and done, would be astronomical. And it all started when How Richard's mind raced. What could they have possibly done to provoke this? An accounting error. A missed payment. It made no sense. This wasn't business. This was an execution. His phone buzzed again. It was an email from his legal department with a forwarded message from the office of Marcus Thorne, Blackwood's chief counsel. It was short and brutal. Subject: Notice of Default and Contract Termination. Mr. Sterling. Pursuant to Section 11C of the Project Nightingale Master Agreement. Global Wings Airlines is found to be in material breach due to actions bringing the firm into significant public disrepute and demonstrating a catastrophic failure of corporate governance. All financial and operational services provided by Blackwood Capital and its subsidiaries are hereby suspended. A full brief will be provided to your counsel. Catastrophic failure of corporate governance. Public disrepute. They hadn't had a crash. There was no scandal. Was there? Then a junior analyst in the corner of the room, who had been furiously typing on his laptop, spoke up, his voice trembling. "Mr. Sterling, I think I found something. There's chatter on social media from JFK. A passenger, a Dr. Anya Sharma, is claiming she was denied boarding for Flight 815 this morning. Racially profiled, she says." Richard Sterling stared at him blankly. One passenger complaint, and Alistair Blackwood decides to bankrupt my company. Who in God's name is Dr. Anya Sharma? No one in the room knew, but as her name was typed into the search bar of Blackwood Capital's own intelligence database, her file appeared instantly. Her accolades, her research, her degrees from Stanford and MIT, and under family, one name: Alistair Blackwood. The analyst looked up from his screen, his face pale. "Sir, Anya Sharma is Alistair Blackwood's daughter." In the dead silence of the boardroom, the sound of Richard Sterling's $5,000 fountain pen snapping in his hand was like a gunshot. The puzzle was solved. The reason for their corporate annihilation wasn't a complex financial dispute. It was a gate agent in Queens with a bad attitude and a manager who backed her up. It was a $2.1 billion mistake named Brenda. The emergency flight from Dallas to New York felt like a journey to his own execution for Richard Sterling. He'd spent the entire flight on a satellite phone, trying and failing to stem the bleeding. His pleas to Marcus Thorne were met with the icy, impenetrable wall of legal process. His calls to bankers were met with regretful but firm refusals to extend credit. The word was out on Wall Street: Global Wings had crossed Alistair Blackwood, and no one was willing to be collateral damage. By the time he landed, GWA's stock had been halted after a 35% plunge, wiping out $1.8 billion in market capitalization. Add the called-in loan and the operational losses, and the $2.1 billion figure from the initial news flashes, was looking conservative. The story was the lead item on every news channel. Not the financial details, which were still emerging, but the human one, airline grounds itself, after CEO's daughter profiled. The names of Brenda and Mark Peterson were already circulating on Twitter. Richard had been granted a meeting, not a negotiation, he was told, but an audience. He was driven directly to the Blackwood Capitol building, a gleaming spear of black glass that seemed to mock the sky. He was escorted to the 90th floor, not by a friendly receptionist, but by two grim-faced security men who didn't speak a word. The office was exactly as he'd imagined, vast, silent, and intimidating. Alistair Blackwood was not sitting behind his desk. He was standing by the window, looking down at the city, his back to the door. He was a tall man, impeccably dressed in a dark grey suit that probably cost more than Richard's car. He didn't turn around when Richard entered. "Mr. Blackwood," Richard began, his voice hoarse. "Alistair, I cannot begin to express my profound apologies for the misunderstanding at JFK this morning." Alistair remained silent for a long moment, watching a helicopter land on a nearby rooftop. Finally, he spoke, his voice calm and resonant. "It was not a misunderstanding, Richard. It was a choice. Your employee made a choice based on prejudice. Her manager made a choice to endorse that prejudice, and your corporation for years has made the choice to foster a culture where such behavior is possible." He turned around slowly. His eyes were like chips of granite. "This is not about my daughter. She is a brilliant, resilient woman who can handle herself. She is already in London preparing for her speech. This is about the principle. You have a cancer in your organization, a cancer of arrogance and discrimination. I don't invest in sick companies. We will fire them," Richard said quickly, desperately. "Brenda, Mark, anyone involved. We will issue a public apology to Dr. Sharma. We'll donate to a charity of her choice. Anything." Alistair gave a slight, dismissive shake of his head. "You're trying to treat a tumor with a bandage. Firing two low-level employees is meaningless. It's a public relations gesture." "I am not interested in gestures." He walked to his desk, but didn't sit. He leaned against it, crossing his arms. The power dynamic was absolute. "Let me be clear about what happens now." Alistair said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, which was somehow more menacing than a shout. "This is the price for turning my systems back on and restructuring your debt. Not forgiving it. Restructuring it." Richard held his breath. First, Alistair began holding up a finger. "You will issue a public statement, not just an apology to my daughter, but an admission of systemic failure within your company. You will detail the exact steps you are taking to rectify it." He held up a second finger. "Second, you will not donate to a charity of my daughter's choice. You will establish a $25 million foundation funded by Global Wings, dedicated to providing scholarships and grants for minorities in the aviation industry. My firm will oversee its charter." A third finger. "Third, you will overhaul your entire customer service training protocol from the top down. The new curriculum will be designed by a diversity and inclusion consulting firm, which I will select. All 30,000 of your employees, including yourself and the board, will complete it." Richard's head was spinning. The cost, the public humiliation. But he had no choice. "Yes, of course, we agree." Alistair looked at him, and for the first time a flicker of something other than cold anger appeared in his eyes. It was pity. "I'm not finished," he said. "That is simply the price for your company's survival. There is also a price for my renewed partnership." He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle in the room. "Blackwood Capital will be converting your debt to equity. We will take a 51% controlling interest in Global Wings Airlines. The market has, after all, presented us with a significant discount today." Richard Sterling felt his knees go weak. It was a corporate death sentence for him and his board. They would be puppets. Alistair Blackwood wasn't just punishing them. He was seizing their kingdom. It was a checkmate so brutal, so complete, that it was almost beautiful in its strategic perfection. And finally, Alistair added his voice, returning to its flat, emotionless tone. "You will, of course, be tendering your resignation, effective immediately. Your board will follow by the end of the week. My team will be taking over." Richard stared, speechless. He had come here to save his job. He was leaving without his company. "Discrimination is a poor business model," Richard Alistair said, turning back toward the window as a clear dismissal. "It creates inefficiencies, and I always capitalize on inefficiency." Richard Sterling stumbled out of the office, a ruined man. The machine of justice once set in motion was absolute. The reckoning was complete. All because a gate agent on a Tuesday morning decided she didn't like the look of a woman who was waiting patiently in line. The news of the Blackwood takeover of Global Wings sent shockwaves through the industry. It was a story for the ages, a corporate titan using his immense power not for a typical hostile takeover, but as a direct consequence of a single act of discrimination. The story had everything drama power, a clear villain, and a satisfying if brutal resolution. The changes at the newly controlled Global Wings were swift and merciless. Alistair Blackwood's transition team, led by a cadre of his most efficient executives, descended upon the Dallas headquarters. Richard Sterling's resignation was the first of many. The entire executive board was replaced. The new company mandate issued from the 90th floor in Manhattan was simple: excellence, integrity, and inclusivity. In that order. Failure in one is failure in all. The $25 million foundation was established within a week. The new mandatory training programs were rolled out. The airline's branding was subtly but significantly altered, with a new ad campaign focusing on the diversity of its own staff and the passengers they served. It was a masterclass in corporate re-engineering, born from an act of spite. Anya Sharma delivered her keynote address in London to a standing ovation. Her research was hailed as a monumental step forward. She politely declined all interview requests about the incident at JFK, issuing a single written statement. "Prejudice is a societal illness. I am fortunate that in my case there was a swift and effective cure. My focus, as always, is on my work, which I hope will one day cure illnesses of a different kind." She flew back to New York on a Blackwood Capital private jet, quietly resuming her life, leaving the corporate carnage in her wake. But what of the catalysts? What of Brenda and Mark Peterson? They were, as promised, fired, but their punishment didn't end there. In the age of the internet, they had become infamous. Their names and faces were plastered across social media and tabloid news sites. They were the memes, the punchlines, the human faces of a $2.1 billion blunder. Mark Peterson, a man whose entire career was built on avoiding confrontation, found himself at the center of a global one. He was unemployable. The airline industry was a surprisingly small world, and no carrier would touch the man who cost Global Wings its independence. He sold his house in the suburbs and moved 2 states away, taking a job managing a self-storage facility. a place of quiet anonymity where he could hide from the world. His mistake had cost him his career, his reputation, and his self-respect. Brenda's fate was harsher. She had been the agent of the conflict, the one who lit the match. She reveled in her brief moment of power at the gate, and the public vilification was for her a bewildering and terrifying reversal. She received threats. People picketed her home. She was forced to move to change her name, but the story always followed her. She tried to find work, any work, but a simple background check would reveal her history. She saw herself as the victim scapegoated by a powerful billionaire. In her mind, she had just been doing her job, making a judgment call. She failed to grasp, even as her life crumbled around her, the true nature of her transgression. She never understood that her judgment call was not based on logic or rules, but on a deep-seated prejudice she refused to acknowledge. A year after the incident, she was working as a cashier at a discount grocery store in a town she'd never heard of before her downfall. She was heavier, her face perpetually etched with a look of bitter resentment. One evening, a young woman came through her line. She was a doctor, judging by the scrubs she wore under her coat, her skin the same shade as Anya Sharma's. The doctor smiled kindly at Brenda as she paid for her groceries. For a fleeting second, Brenda felt that old familiar spark of resentment, the same ugly feeling she'd had at Gate B24. A voice in her head whispered a sneering comment. But then the exhaustion and the sheer weight of her new reality crushed it. She looked at her own chapped hands, at the fluorescent lights of the cheap store, at the long, empty evening that awaited her in her tiny apartment. This was her life now. This was the consequence. There was no grand confrontation, no dramatic moment of realization. There was only the quiet, grinding reality of a life diminished, a future erased. The echoes of her smug pronouncement that Anya Sharma would be more comfortable in the back of the plane would haunt her for the rest of her days, a constant reminder of the moment she chose cruelty over kindness and paid a price she could never have imagined. The world hadn't just moved on, it had been reshaped, leaving her behind in the wreckage she had created. 2 years passed. The world, with its voracious appetite for scandal, moved on. The Global Wings takedown, as it had been dubbed by the media, faded from a screaming headline into a business school case study, a cautionary tale whispered in corporate boardrooms. For most, it was a closed chapter. But for those at the story's epicenter, the echoes of that single moment at Gate B24 continued to ripple outwards, reshaping lives in ways both profound and poignantly quiet. Anya Sharma stood beside her father, Alistair Blackwood, in the hushed, book-lined sanctuary of his personal library at his country estate north of New York City. A gentle rain pattered against the leaded glass windows, a soft percussion to the crackling fire in the hearth. This was Alistair's refuge, a place where the titan of industry became just a man, a father. They hadn't spoken of the incident in detail since the day it happened, but it was an invisible presence, a shared memory that had subtly altered the dynamic between them. "Do you ever think we went too far?" Anya asked, her voice barely a whisper. She swirled the amber liquid in her glass, watching the light play within it. "The stories I heard, about the employees who lost their jobs in the restructuring. Not just the executives, people in accounting, marketing, families affected. All because I was insulted." Alistair turned from the fire, his craggy face softened by the warm light. He looked older than he had 2 years ago, but his eyes held the same intense clarity. "It was never just about an insult, Anya. You know that. It was about a sickness. If a surgeon finds a cancer, Does he apologize to the healthy cells he must cut away to save the patient? No. The action is regrettable but necessary. Global Wings was sick. It was arrogant, complacent, and it bred contempt. What happened to you was not an anomaly. It was a symptom. He walked over to a heavy oak desk and picked up a framed black-and-white photograph. It showed a young boy, no older than 10, with dark hair and fiercely determined eyes, standing in front of a dilapidated grocery store. He was holding a box of produce, his knuckles raw. "This was me," Alistair said, his voice taking on a distant quality. "A few years after we emigrated. My father worked at a foundry, my mother cleaned houses. I worked for Mr. Abernathy at his market after school. He was a decent man mostly, but his son Robert was not. One day, a delivery of fresh peaches came in, the best of the season. Robert took one look at me and said, 'Those are for the real customers, boy. You stick to sweeping the floor.' He used a different, uglier word than boy. Anya had never heard this story. Her father rarely spoke of his childhood poverty. I didn't say anything. Alistair continued, his gaze fixed on the photograph. I just swept the floor. But I never forgot the look in his eyes. It was the same look, Anya. The same look of casual ownership. The same assumption that my place in the world was beneath his. The look that says, I am the gatekeeper, and you shall not pass. It is the most dangerous look in the world. He placed the photo back on the desk. I didn't have the power to do anything about it then. I could only sweep the floor and promise myself that one day I would own the whole damned building. The difference between you and me is that you never desired that power. You earned your own through intellect and merit. But you are my daughter, and the power I built became your shield. When your station manager, Mr. Peterson, and his agent Brenda looked at you, they didn't see a world-renowned scientist. They didn't see your humanity. They saw an object to be moved, a problem to be dismissed. They gave you the Robert Abernathy look. He met her eyes, his own blazing with a cold fire. So no, I do not think I went too far. I think I did exactly what I spent 50 years acquiring the power to do. I tore down a gatekeeper's gate. The collateral damage was tragic, but the alternative, allowing that sickness to fester, was unacceptable. Anya nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her heart. It wasn't revenge. It was a correction. A violent, spectacular, market-altering correction. The foundation, she said, changing the subject. The GWA Ascend Scholarship. I got an email today. Alistair's severe expression softened into a genuine smile. Oh, from young Mr. Castillo. Yes. Leo. He passed his final simulator check. He'll be a certified first officer by Christmas. He sent me a picture of himself in the cockpit. He looks so happy, so proud. He should be, Alistair said. The boy is brilliant, top of his class. He reminds me of myself, except he won't have to spend 20 years fighting for a seat at the table. We simply built him a new one. Leo Castillo sat in the captain's seat of a $100 million A350 flight simulator. The hydraulic platform, hissing and tilting around him as he navigated a simulated storm on approach to Hong Kong International. The cockpit was an exact replica, from the feel of the side-stick controller to the dizzying array of glowing screens. 2 years ago, Leo was working 2 jobs, one bussing tables and another stocking shelves to help his family and pay for community college classes. Becoming a pilot for a major airline was a fantasy, a dream as distant as the stars. His instructor, a veteran captain named Sarah Jenkins, who was part of the new guard hired by Blackwood's team, smiled from the co-pilot's seat. "Easy on the rudder, Leo. Let the autopilot handle the shear. Just guide her in. You've got of this." Leo's hands moved with practiced confidence. He was a natural. He had the spatial awareness, the calm under pressure, the mathematical mind. All he had ever lacked was the opportunity. The GWA Ascend Scholarship had provided that. It wasn't just a check for tuition. It was a comprehensive mentorship program, a pathway carved directly into the heart of the revitalized airline. The scholarship application had asked a simple question. What does flying mean to you? Leo had written, "Flying is the ultimate form of possibility. It's proof that with enough ingenuity and determination, even the heaviest things can rise above the clouds. It's not about escaping the world below. It's about seeing it from a new perspective, a perspective where borders disappear, and we are all just people journeying." He brought the simulated aircraft down through the digital rain and onto the runway with a smooth, firm landing that barely registered. "Textbook Castillo," Sarah said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Welcome to the flight deck." Leo leaned back, a wide grin spreading across his face as the simulation ended and the screens reverted to a neutral blue. He looked at the Golden Eagle logo on the yoke. He knew the story of the airline's transformation. Every new hire did. It was part of their orientation. They didn't mention the names, but they told the story of the passenger, the confrontation, and the fallout. It was presented as the creation myth of the new global wings, a story of how a moment of failure was transformed into a catalyst for profound positive change. Leo felt a strange connection to that anonymous passenger. Her humiliation had, through a bizarre and brutal alchemy of power, become his triumph. Her closed door had become his open sky. He made a quiet vow to himself that he would honor that sacrifice, that he would be the kind of pilot, the kind of person who saw the humanity in everyone, whether in row 1 or row 41. In a dimly lit laundromat, in a bleak corner of Ohio, the spin cycle of a washing machine shuddered to a halt. Brenda, her face puffy and pale under the flickering fluorescent lights, pulled out her meager load of work uniforms. Her life had shrunk to a series of joyless loops: the tiny damp apartment, the long bus ride, the 12-hour shift as a dispatcher for a local taxi service, a job she despised. She sank onto a hard plastic chair to fold her clothes, her gaze drifting to a small television bolted to the wall in the corner. A commercial came on. It was for Global Wings Airlines. It wasn't like their old ads, which featured sleek jets and glamorous destinations. This one featured people. A young black woman, a pilot laughing with her ground crew. An older Asian man, a gate agent patiently helping a family with their tickets. And then a young Latino man in a crisp pilot's uniform, looking out of a cockpit window with a look of pure, unadulterated joy. It was Leo Castillo. The ad ended with a simple tagline over the GWA logo, "Where everyone belongs." Brenda stared at the screen, her hands frozen on a half-folded shirt. For 2 years, she had nursed her bitterness. She was the victim. Her life had been destroyed by a vindictive billionaire and his entitled daughter. She was a scapegoat, a sacrifice on the altar of political correctness. Her prejudice in her mind was just a feeling, a harmless gut instinct. But looking at Leo's face on the screen, something inside her finally irrevocably broke. It wasn't a sudden epiphany. It was a slow, sickening erosion of her defenses. She saw in his face not a threat, not an interloper, but the very possibility she had tried to extinguish in Anya Sharma. Her gut instinct hadn't been harmless. It had been an act of erasure. She had looked at a person and tried to deny them their place, their dignity, their earned seat at the table. And the world in response had not just punished her. It had done something far more devastating. It had rendered her irrelevant. It had taken the spot she vacated and given it to someone like Leo. It had replaced her small, bitter worldview with a bigger, more hopeful one. The universe hadn't just slapped her wrist, it had evolved past her. The hollow feeling that washed over her was not anger or self-pity. It was the cold, clear, and crushingly heavy realization of her own obsolescence. She was a relic of a bygone way of thinking, a ghost haunting the laundromat of her own failed life. The hard karma wasn't the loss of her job or her house. It was this moment, this quiet, complete, and undeniable understanding that she had made herself small and the world had simply grown too large to notice her anymore. Anya Sharma closed her laptop. Leo's smiling face in the email was a beacon. She thought of the intricate, beautiful, and sometimes terrifying chain of events. The ugliness at the gate had been transformed. Her father's brutal, destructive power had been channeled into something creative. It hadn't erased the insult, but it had built a legacy from its ashes. She finally understood. The power she and her father wielded wasn't just the power to freeze flights and shatter companies. It was the power to redraw the map, to decide what grows in the space left behind. It was the awesome, terrifying, and ultimately hopeful responsibility of pulling the weeds and then planting a garden. This story, a blend of documented events and dramatic storytelling, serves as a powerful reminder that our actions, no matter how small they seem, can have cascading consequences. A single moment of prejudice, a quiet abuse of power at an airport gate, set in motion a chain of events that toppled a corporate giant. It highlights a profound truth in our interconnected world. True power isn't always loud and aggressive. Sometimes it's the quiet, dignified response that brings forth the most earth-shattering justice. The world is full of Brendas and Marks, but it is also full of Anyas and Alistair's, people who refuse to let injustice stand. If you believe in standing up against prejudice and holding people accountable for their actions, hit that like button to show your support. Share this video with others so this story can serve as a warning and an inspiration. And if you want more true stories of dramatic consequences and powerful reckonings, make sure you subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. Thank you for listening.